Dan Lucas and Trevor Sikkema of PewterReport.com here at One Buck Place. Trevor, a Monday afternoon, and Dirk Koetter's weekly press conference was loaded with information, things moving forward. I don't know if it's what fans are interested in hearing or really want to hear, but let's start with the quarterback position because Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to get the start against the New York Giants. Koetter says he gives us the best chance to win. Is that contradictory to what you think or what fans think should be happening right now with the team?
Well, I mean, if he really thinks that, then that's the move that he's got to go with. I mean, you know, we're talking about Bucs fans should talk about the future all they want, but Koetter's got to save his job because right now it's kind of up in the air. And if he thinks that Ryan Fitzpatrick is his best chance, then he's got to play him. Now, I would argue that it's not. At this point, you know, Fitzpatrick kind of caught lightning in a bottle at the beginning of the year. He got those 2 wins against the Saints and the Eagles. They looked spectacular, and that's the only reason why you go back to him, is you hope that he might be able to recapture some of that magic, if you will. That's the word that we're using. But against Carolina, I mean, they had the late game comeback, but they weren't even in the game for most of the game. And then obviously only scoring 3 points this past week. It's clear that this isn't magic that can happen every week. So if that's the case, you've got a guy who is more talented, does have a longer future, could be the guy for this franchise. I'm really surprised they did not go back to Jameis Winston. I think that at this point, you're kind of just wasting time here at 3-6. It's a lot different than being 3-4 and going back to Fitzpatrick.
And as far as the play calling goes, he says, yes, I took over the play calling Sunday. I wanted to get more running involved. I think he accomplished that. And for what it's worth, the offense had a darn good day. They didn't get into the end zone. That was the issue. Undecided this week moving forward. And I don't know if that's wishy-washy on his part or if he and Todd Monken really have a thing where when they put the game plan together, it's better if you call it or I call it.
Yeah, I think that they do. I believe them when they say it's the quote-unquote Buccaneers offense that is called, but this going back and forth doesn't make any sense. If you were to take the play calling back as he did this last week, take it the rest of the year. You're the head coach. Just that's what the decision would have had to have been. It can't just be this back and forth kind of game. So that to me did not make any sense. That you know, of the many things that was talked about over the press conference, that's the part that didn't make any sense to me. Even though I do think that Todd Monken has been a more comfortable play caller, especially at the beginning of the year for those 2 wins, most notably. Then you saw a little bit of a shift in the middle of the year. I think that Koetter had a little bit more voice in what was called over those couple of games after that Steelers game mainly. Now we learned that he officially took play calling back. It does not make any sense for him to go back to Todd Monken or to even answer the question the way he did, where he says, you know, it's up in the air. We haven't decided yet. That just, to me, does not make any sense because that tells me that it's too much of a team thing. There's too much deciding going. You have got to have one play caller and you have to trust him to make the plays that are ready. If Dirk Koetter doesn't trust Todd Monken, take the play calling back. But if you do, let him have it. It doesn't make any sense to go back and forth.
Moving forward, and I know Sunday the reaction after a game is always more emotional than it is when you finally processed it.
Right.
Everything Koetter seemed a little bit more, you know, with it. Monday, he was very emotional inside. You could tell.
He was.
Sunday. That said, you've got a core of team leadership. You've got games on the schedule coming up here that are extremely winnable. They must have wins, not just a win, but string some wins here if they're going to keep what they would like to have happen alive. But as far as saving jobs and saving jobs on the roster as well, what is the mindset here going into a game week coming off of the most disappointing loss we've seen in a long time?
I mean, it didn't sound too confident after that game. I mean, and Dirk Koetter was basically asked straight up, hey, what is your message to this team now? You were 3-6. The probability over the last 20 years of saying that you could make the playoffs at 3-6 is 4%. All right, that's not a heavy number that you would want to bet on. And he basically said, you know, I didn't really have a message for the team. It's kind of that you just have to go out and do it. And part of me agrees with him. Part of this is still on the players. But then again, it is his job as the head coach to not say that, to not be in that situation, to not have nothing to say, to not know what to say to your team. And that's what really, really worried me. And I think that it bled over. That uncertainty of what do I do now bled over into the press conference that even happened on Monday. He was more collected. He had more of his answers that he knew that he could say, but still not sure who was going to call the plays, going back and forth about who's going to be the kicker, the reasoning that he had for the quarterback, non-quarterback change. It was all just, it was too uncertain. And he's the guy, he's hired, he's in this position to be certain, to know what to do, to come up with the what's next, even when things aren't going well. And things have just not gone well for so long that at this point, he looks a little helpless, and that's not ever good for your head coach.
What happens if they do string together a few wins here? Let's take the playoffs out of it.
Okay.
Let's say they get it to 7-9 by the end of the season. Is that enough to kind of keep things intact here?
It all depends kind of how it happens down the stretch. Context is a big deal because, Lovie Smith had his wins and losses, but it was down the stretch. It was in December, that terrible December that he had, that is the reason why he got fired. And so it kind of depends how it all unfolds. But even if they go 7-9, you cannot forget about how they fumbled the beginning of this season and how they fumbled last season and how you've got to look at that 2016 9-7 year and think, man, how much of that was just luck of a lot of what they were doing? And so that's, I think, what the decisions, that has to go into the decision with Jason Light, with the Glazers, when they're reevaluating Dirk Koetter, because I don't think there's a magic number. I don't think it's, hey, if you hit this, you're safe. I think it's all about context, and for right now, the context does not look good for Dirk Koetter to still be this head coach of this football team next year.